And hey, everybody, happy Friday. Or is it Friday? I don't even know what day of the week it is. We're all just back from, what the heck was that thing called? IT Nation, right? This giant conference in, Orlando, of course, because that's where all the IT conferences are this week, this year, and this sessions, right? So, I think most of us, Tim, I know I slept like 12 hours Sunday night after I got home, but how was the show for you, Tim?
It was awesome. I think some people say it didn't live up to the hype. They were like, the closing party was a little weak, but overall, I mean, no one can argue with the weather. Last year was a hurricane. This year was sunny. I don't think we saw a drop of rain. So great crowd. No one kind of got canceled. No airport shut down. Got to see all of our people we don't usually get to see, virtually. So I thought it was awesome. I didn't sponsor a booth personally or run a booth personally. So Tim was kind of like, probably felt like, you got to execute, get that ROI, right? I certainly, I spent a little bit of time at both the Cabela booth and, compliance scorecard. So many people we know and want to visit all their booths. So it's hard just to be on, right? Be not only on your feet, kind of like, hey. I've talked too much, and so, but anyway, I loved it. It's my favorite event every year. So what'd you think? I know.
So you're right. Like, the being on the whole time, right? So this was the first time Compliance Scorecard was there as a vendor. We've gone years past as a participant, either as an MSP participant or an Evolve participant. So this is the first time I've done it as a vendor. Not our first conference as a vendor, but certainly the biggest one we've ever done. We had some great people there helping us. Like, I was so excited to have our co-founder and my wife there. Her first IT conference ever. I think it was, she really enjoyed it. She was able to get to a couple of sessions to learn some stuff about how MSPs operate. But for me personally, like, oh my gosh, I can't tell you how many steps a minute I was getting, but it was a lot, right? Way more than I normally do. But it was really fun. It was exciting. We're looking forward to connecting with people after the show. I'm sure everybody's getting the email fatigue from everybody. We're kind of taking it slow to make sure we're not overwhelming people with all those blasted emails. Hey, thanks for the show. But I know we were really, really happy to have our good friend with us at the booth, our good friend Jesse, and we were so excited to have you there. You did an amazing job. Thank you so much.
Thank you. It was fun. I had a blast. Yeah, there's the piece of it, like, it's exhausting, and absolutely. I think I had about a 2-day sleep for 10 hours a day and still not feel completely rested when I woke up when I got back. But I will say, like you mentioned, this is my first time as a vendor. So it's kind of like a different paradigm. Who do I talk to? Who do I sit with? Kind of like the first day of high school. I was telling people. But no, it was super fun. And like I said, it was great working the booth with you guys. And, I think we had a good little shtick going on where I was able to give my perspective from a consultant perspective, why I like compliance risk, and be honest about that. And so I think there's just some really fruitful conversations to be had. And like you said, getting to meet everyone. And I walked away without a broken pinky toe like I did last IT Nation. I was there. So it's a win for me.
Win-win, right?
And I was the hero because I brought home toys for the kids. And they're like, wait, these were free? I can't believe this.
You got something for me, something for nothing. That's awesome. So today's conversation, we're really excited to talk about vulnerability and that fun stuff around what's happening, like CVEs, EPSS, all the acronym mouthful stuff that I can't even say because my mouth is like I need more something to drink. Oh my goodness. So why don't we start off with Dylan here. Dylan, tell us a little bit about yourself. Let me get you up here on stage real quick. And if I can click the right buttons, because, I'm still tired.
No, that's right.
No, we'll get this right. It's just technology. Dylan,
there we go.
Did you go to IT Nation?
No, we did not go this year. I was not able to. I had a couple of personal travel plans that were already on the books, so was not able to make it this year. Definitely had a lot of FOMO, from all the Discord and Slack messages that I was getting, and all the text selfies of like, "Hey, where are you?" I was like, "I didn't make it this year," so had extreme FOMO. But no, thanks everybody for having us on. So Dylan Hutchison, head of channel over at Shield Cyber. Background before this, I was at an MSSP for a little over 5 years. So joining the dark side, if you will, of the vendor world.
Nice. And well, we certainly missed you at IT Nation. What will you be at any of the upcoming, albeit Right of Boom or MSP Geek or DratoCon or KaseyaCon or whatever they're calling them these days?
Yeah, we're actually putting together really that calendar for 2024 right now. So would love recommendations from people of where everybody's going to be, and more importantly, ones that people are skipping. And the reason why.
Yeah, why are you not going? So we can make sure we don't go there either, right? So
exactly. Yep.
Dylan, glad to have you here. We're excited to kind of dive into this topic. Hey, Teddy, did you go to IT Nation or no? Or am I just batting 1,000 here or what?
No, we did not. So as a whole, we are so for background too, brand new to the channel. I am brand new to the channel. Dylan has been in it for a little while, but my background is in more enterprise type of penetration testing is kind of where I come from. And I heard all the buzz about IT Nation is where you need to go. It's where you need to be. And we hit a few conferences earlier this year, but just being freshly out of stealth mode, just kind of trying to figure out where we were going and which conferences to focus on. We're going to kind of hit the ground running next year. So Dylan's probably being quiet on the other end there, trying to figure out like what is the messaging that we're going to pass along here for this. But that's really what it comes down to. We're very focused on product right now, and then next year we're building out that entire really the plan for the year ahead. We definitely missed it though. We went to 5 conferences this year, and I got to say, similar to what Jesse said, my first one was, who am I going to sit with? Who am I going to hang out with at these places? It seemed like everyone knew everyone,
Right.
And it was just kind of like, okay, we're going to go try to find someone that'll eat lunch with us, and then it ended up being a fantastic experience where, everyone was super, super helpful, wanted to hear more about what we did, what we're doing. We actually met with Tim and actually both Tims at MSP Geek, which was our second. And from then that conference moving forward, it was like we could really feel the community aspect of things, and it was great.
That's awesome. And well, since you mentioned it, let's give a shout out to our friends over at MSP Geek and the MSP Geek conference, where we will be a proud sponsor. But besides that, I believe pre-registration is open, if I remember seeing that from Kyle the other day, right? So if you're listening to this live, it will most likely be that Black Friday or Purple Thursday or Gray Sunday or Bloody Sunday, whatever the hell it is. When you're listening to this, head on over to MSP Geek and get yourself a ticket, because we all want to see you there, right? It's really great tech focused, whether it's help desk or level 1, 2, 3. It's really has a great focus on the technician aspect. So I'm excited because I'm doing a pre-day to teach policies and procedures to technicians, because that's fun. But so conferences. I think enough about that. I mean, I don't even remember what we're talking about here today. Something about management and vulnerabilities, or what are we doing today?
Well, I think today we're going to talk about vulnerability management and how it is the bane of many an MSP in the industry today. It's probably, you know, from my perspective, having built vulnerability management programs and working with my clients to fix them, it's one of the most difficult things for an MSP to do well because of the different layers of complexity with the client, their outsourced development personnel, different system owners, all those things. And so I think today we just want to talk about some of those challenges and give some pragmatic solutions to some of them. So,
I mean, doesn't my Chrome just update automatically?
Wow. Well, yeah, you just got to click it. That's the problem.
That's an easy one. Yeah.
Right.
Well,
yeah,
I guess.
Go ahead.
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
I think it's very interesting, right? So if you look at, as Tim and I do, and Jesse probably does, we look at thousands of MSPs. Teddy does probably as well, looking for new prospects. You look at their offering, right? And you look at where they were a year or two ago. I would say vulnerability management is probably that kind of one extra additional thing that they're adding. Maybe it's more sophisticated IAM, like a PAM tool, like privilege access, right? Like that's clearly very hot right now as well. Compliance is coming along. Compliance is a little more difficult, right, Tim? But
no, why make it simple?
Yeah, why make it simple? Vulnerability management is an interesting thing, right? Because you need the tools, you need the processes, you need to be able to sell it and evidence it, right? So I worked at a vulnerability management vendor. We currently have one, that's one aspect of where I work as well now. But I think the interesting thing is, like, in doing it, it kind of exposes all the weaknesses you already had providing IT to the end customer. So it's kind of a tricky proposition, because if you turn this thing on and you're like, oh my God, I mean, what am I doing here? Right. Yeah. And then all of a sudden, you get through kind of that first wave and cleaning things up, doing those major patches. So it is a very interesting thing. It's difficult for kind of them to get over the hump. Do they price it into their package, right? I think we should talk about all these things, like how do they price it? How do they, is it an add-on? Is it included in their stack? You kind of get all the different variations. So as a vendor, Teddy and Dylan, I'm sure you've seen this. It's like they're going to ask these questions, like, right? How do I?
Dylan, tell us your top 2 or 3 questions that you get from the MSPs or the partners that you're talking to. Like, what are a couple of questions that you always get?
Yeah, well, one of the really popular questions that we've been getting is, why should I even offer vulnerability management? Isn't it kind of telling on myself? It's one of those funny talk tracks of like, hey, our customers think that we're already patching all of these systems on a regular basis, and you're showing vulnerabilities outside of, hey, my Chrome is updating magically. So that's one of the core pieces. Tim, you hit it right there. It was, hey, how do we even package this into our current products? Like, does this live in our current tech stack? Is this an add-on? The answer is both. It really depends on where your MSP is at operationally. And then a whole other thing is, how do I actually manage these vulnerabilities ongoing? We've all seen these vulnerability scans that you get the CSV spreadsheet of 1 million vulnerabilities. How in the heck do I prioritize these and, really batch my remediation? What actually matters? Those are a lot of the big problems that we're getting from our MSPs, and, really guiding them along that vulnerability management journey. One of the things that we'll probably hit on is that vulnerabilities exist outside of CVEs. So
it's not like that movie with Jim Carrey, Bruce Almighty, whatever it was, where he's like, reply all. And then poof, everybody gets a yes. Like, it doesn't work that way.
Yeah. See, I wish you could just delete the vulnerability spreadsheet and they go away. But
called risk avoidance, Dylan.
Yeah. Well, as the change management guy, I might have a problem with that.
Teddy, interesting. I know we've talked several times, but I'd be interested to hear from you what really struck you as you came into the channel from the enterprise side of things, and you started doing this vulnerability management, and what things have you noticed or just what have you seen? Give me your first impression of vulnerability management as it relates to MSPs.
Sure. Yeah. I think the main thing would just be the MSP market just seems to be a little bit behind in terms of scanning for vulnerabilities. I mean, that makes sense, right? Your small, medium businesses, less budget, things like that you're trying to push along. But, you know, I always think about it being like, you know, a couple years behind in terms of the tech. What someone's gonna develop something super groundbreaking for the enterprise or whatever. Then it'll work its way down to the channel and it'll become a little bit more digestible and a little bit more affordable. But that being said, it's like that's a bad way of looking at it, because managing vulnerabilities and stuff like that as an MSP for your clients is entirely different than managing them for an enterprise, right? Where you've got strict policies in place across the board for all of your organizations and or for your single organization, right? But when you're managing 50 to 100, 150 clients, they all have different risk profiles. They all have different industries, things like that. So it's extremely difficult to kind of work those in and standardize it, if you will. Right. One thing that I got very frequently earlier on was, you know, this is like, you know, like Dylan said, why would we tell on ourselves? You're like, we're already doing patch management, so it's fine.
Yeah.
We'll get into all of these topics on today, I'm sure. But like another thing that was major was, you know, well, pen testing and vulnerability management and vulnerability scanning. Like, what's the difference between all of them? And there being not a very clear delineation between them. And I'd say that's even like I got off a call earlier today, right, with a client that was calling a vulnerability scan a pen test, or a pen test a vulnerability scan, right? So and not knowing what the difference is between those things. Yeah. So I think it's an education problem as a whole.
That's a tough one, right? I mean, the lines are blurry. Right?
It is.
No, they're not. Vulnerability scanning and penetration testing are two completely different things, unlike vCISO and FCIO.
To convolute that, you have vulnerability scanning as part of your info gathering for a pen test, and it's in the pen test report, so that makes it even more confusing, right? We didn't test these, but here's some vulnerabilities you might want to look at. Yeah, so maybe that's where we start. Is
vulnerability. Jesse, you okay over there? You're a little vulnerable with your dog going off in the background.
No, that's my proactive monitoring system.
Okay, perfect. That's your sock going nuts over there.
Oh, look at that! Another false positive. Yeah, it must be a sock after all.
I love it.
I had this awesome diagram, kind of like AV, EDR, vulnerability management, pen test. I think it's way too deep in my feed, but I was hoping to pull that up. But you know, I think that is also a great conversation, right, with the MSP on like how you're going to market, right? They're like, oh, I have Sentinel-1. Like, what do I need vulnerability management for?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Let's start there. I want to address the 500-pound gorilla in the room. Is how do we tell?
Hold on. Stop talking about me as the 500-pound gorilla, and let's pull up the 500-pound gorilla.
That's where I want to start. Yeah, that's where I want to start. Is the 500-pound gorilla in the room? Is that we don't want to? There's a worry. We run vulnerability management. We're going to prove that we're not doing what we say we're going to do. So let's just address that, right? And to that, I say a healthy dose of accountability is probably exactly what you need right there. So lean into that and use it to provide as a talking point for your clients. So say, not only do we do patch management, we provide vulnerability management to prove to you that we're doing what we say we're going to do. And on top of that, you get better asset management. You get your active discovery. It helps us find things in the environment that maybe shouldn't be there. You know, a user brought in their own wireless, their own Wi-Fi router or something and plugged it in because the Wi-Fi is bad in the back corner of the office and just created a backdoor into your network. I've run into it too. So all these things, I would say lean into that. So instead of hiding from it, use that.
Yeah, really great point there. So, you know, we don't give them a choice, or at least when I was in my MSP, we didn't give them a choice. This is the level one thing, you know, good, better, best. In each of those packages, we had different things. I think we talked about packaging and pricing earlier, where they didn't have a choice. Like, to your accountability point, like, yes, we're taking care of patches, and this is not only how we're approving it, but we're trying to stay up on the latest, greatest breaking vulnerabilities because patches don't happen 24/7, especially with the Microsoft stuff on Patch Tuesday. We want to deploy those appropriately, but there could be a 0 day that we need to take care of right now. And if we were just doing patching on some weekly, monthly thing, we might miss one of those 0 day things because we're not pushing them out every single day. Yeah, we're pushing them out as part of our monthly program. Unlike vulnerability stuff, where it's like we're constantly looking at that list and looking for that 0 day.
Yeah, I think just and another add to that is we've all run into this on the MSP side of things, where you find out there's this one computer that has the patching's been failing for the last month, the last 2 months. For some reason, you're not getting a report on it. And you know what? You want to find out about that. What you don't want to do is not fulfill your contractual obligations and have that be a breach point, right? You'd rather know about that ahead of time. So I think, telling on yourself or making you look bad, I'd rather learn about it and fix it before it became an issue or before the client notices it first from some other external audit. Or now insurance scans, right? Insurance are doing vulnerability management on their own, so you might as well be prepared for it.
Yeah.
So Teddy, maybe you could talk a little bit about like what that looked like from the enterprise side, because obviously it was completely different now that you're in the MSP space. What did that transition start to look like?
Yeah, well, just to one point I just want to make sure we get to, and I'll get to that, but it's just that from the transparency perspective of like telling on yourself. I don't think it's telling on yourself. I think if you have a good relationship with your clients as a provider, you should be transparent enough with them to say that
absolutely
these are the things that we're finding. These are the things that are in the environment. And like to your point about, not every computer can be patched and everything like that. Vulnerability management is not the goal of vulnerability management, not to patch everything. It's not to show you all the vulnerabilities so you can patch them. The goal of vulnerability management is to help you address the risk that is in your environment, right? So there are machines in the environment that you may not be able to patch, like because the patch is going to take down this application that handles this thing. And that's that just is what it is. So you have to be able to evaluate those risks and be able to decide, are you going to accept that risk? Is this going to be an exception for a few months or a year until you can figure this out? And so and I think just a common misconception about vulnerability management in general is just that it's like, it's equivalent to patch management. It means everything.
Right.
You have to live with things in your environment. Like it's just a part of it. And it's how you prioritize things. And you got to make sure that you're prioritizing them properly. Now, what is the source in which you're deciding how you're going to prioritize those things? Is that to get to.
Yeah, that's a great point.
You certainly hit on a key point, right? So, pick a different genre like antivirus versus MDR, XDR, next gen AV. Like when I think Dylan said it earlier about an education problem, like when the space looks at vulnerability management, I feel like they're thinking, oh, it's just proving or not proving we're doing our job. And it's just yet another thing of patch management. But the reality is, and I think, Teddy, you hit the nail right on the head, which is, no, it's actually part of your risk management, right? It's really part of how am I helping protect my client's revenue, reputation, and risk, right? All the things we talked about at IT. Right?
Yeah, I think where MSPs, at least what I've seen in programs that I've worked in and helped fix, is where you get into trouble is you haven't scoped appropriately for who's covered by what and who's doing what. And so, I want to talk about that quickly. And what I'm currently advising the MSPs I'm working with to do is to actually use workflow vulnerability management diagrams in like a business process notation format. Yeah, I knew Tim would like that. But no, use that in your scopes of work and say, hey, we've all agreed this is who's going to handle what, and these are the groups doing it. And so once you have that in place, it's very easy to automate that and say this vulnerability is with this system that's owned by this person and it goes here. And that flows into having a good vCISO and risk management program, having a good governance program. So I think that's another big piece that MSPs need to start thinking about before they sell a vulnerability scanning and say, oh, this is actually vulnerability management, because you get yourself into all sorts of scoping problems. And that's where it's hard to fix costs and understand what can we charge for this, right?
Exactly. It's interesting because I've been doing vulnerability management for several years with our clients and our MSP. And then, you try to as an MSP, I want to charge appropriately for this. Right. And as I started to dive into the reach, I know what I'm paying. And I started looking at, all the other tools that are out there, what I'm paying, and kind of do that average math of say, great, it's $20 an it's a dollar figure per endpoint.
Mm-hmm.
Throw your margins on it, blah, blah, but it was really difficult for me to figure out how to feel comfortable charging for this stuff, right? Because it's one thing to charge for the tool. It's really a vCISO piece, right? As you were saying, Jesse, it's really how are we managing that risk? Yeah, the tool is there. Yes, we love Shield and Connect Secure and Nodeware and all the others in the platform. And yes, I did mention them all because we are product agnostic here. But but the point is, we have a thing to do a thing. Do we have the people in the process to support it? Right?
Yeah, I'd be interested to hear from the Shield guys, whoever wants to grab this. What do you see from your partners? How are they charging for this? And just maybe give us a little inside baseball there.
Yes, I'll take it.
World.
Yeah, no, I'll take it. And it's one of those big problems because you guys just talked about it. Should we be charging for this? Should this be part of what we're already doing? Should we absorb these costs? The answer is no. I mean, that's just the reality. This is part of your risk management program. I'd say on average, we're seeing our partners right around that $5 per endpoint per user ballpark.
All right, so I need to go back to my client that I was charging $30 per endpoint and fix that.
Yep, there you go. But so here's the other thing is they're also tacking on project work for the tech drag of vulnerability management. I'm very transparent. I'm a sales guy. So the tech drag that comes along with vulnerability management, vulnerability scanning is huge. It ropes into a lot of project work and ancillary managed services.
Yeah.
That's why I'm charging $30 instead of $3.
Exactly.
I'm taking that cost into the remediation pieces.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yes.
Yeah, I think that's right.
Yeah. Go ahead, Jesse. Yeah.
No, I think I was just going to say, I think that's right. I think you need to have some sort of retainer-based model where you are charging a monthly, but you say, hey, if it goes above and beyond, it goes back to scoping, then we're going to have to dip into project work. And I always try to structure these as auto approval. If we're doing your vulnerability management, let us manage it and let us do it right. And it goes back to what Teddy said, is if you're doing true risk advisory and there's a nature of trust there in the relationship, that's fine. If they're questioning every bill you send them, there's something deeper wrong with the relationship there. So, Tim, sorry, go ahead, man.
So, I'll jump in a little just in my experience. With Fort Mesa, as you said, we kind of mentioned all the vendors, and they all kind of have pros and cons.
I forgot that one. My bad. I forgot that one.
Cabela as well. I mean, Cabela does it as well.
Cabela.
Right.
Yeah.
I would say it's not more we're more of an insights platform now, but Fort Mesa is really trying to kind of bring you through the whole cycle, right? So it's scanning, scoring, because if you're not scoring, which ones do you attack? And we didn't really get into EPSS and CVSS.
Yeah.
Criticality and probability on an access each, or kind of what's dangerous, what's not dangerous. Then going through that and saying we have to either ticket this. I don't know if you guys are connected to a PSA or something like that, like ConnectWise, or spitting a ticket out saying let's fix that. Or, people just go and say hey, I've got this big blob of Adobe vulnerabilities. Maybe I should just go update Adobe and see what happens, right? So it really depends on kind of attacking it. And then I think it's really an evidencing exercise of look at all the things we've done for you in the last 30, 60, 90 days or whenever, right? As you said, the tech burn down. And they'll be added as they go too. But the first thing you notice is if you've got a MSP that's got clients on Windows, old Windows machine, or if you're not doing regular patching, it looks like a disaster area, really quick. It just sticks out like a sore thumb. So they'll immediately remediate tens of thousands of vulnerabilities just by creating Adobe or the Windows machine or whatever.
Chrome.
So, you're not going to be able to see the forest through the trees if you're not doing regular patching.
Right.
So it's, as you said, it's keeping you honest there, and it's really showing like, oh, we're clearing out all these ridiculous dangerous vulnerabilities. Before Shield Cyber came along, how did people do vulnerability management? They basically read the news, right? Like or it's like on Slack, or it's on one of these channels. It's like, did you guys see that? Like, XYZ thing? Yeah.
So I actually subscribe to the RSS feed on the National Vulnerability Database inside of Outlook, and I had all the folders set up for all of the tools and all the software. So I literally had hundreds, because in Outlook you can have an RSS folder and the feeds that go with it. I literally had hundreds of these things, and I just had to sit there and like watch them come in and then scramble around like, crap, Adobe, hey everybody, thank God for Chocolatey at the time, right? Or the PDQ deploy, right? Like, but now a lot of these platforms, and maybe it is Shield, maybe it is Fort Mesa and Connect Secure and all the others, like click button remediation on stuff, right? A lot of these now start to have that. I get a little leery on the, we scanned it and we're going to remediate it. I get a little leery on that. I mean, I love it conceptually, but I'm like, Fox, Henhouse, I don't know.
Well, most of the time you're going to use an RMM to patch 200 machines, right? So, I get it. There are block and tackling, like you said, that they'll actually do the patching, right? So, but that's really it. Like I said, it's the old way of doing things is like, that's not a very good way of like reading the headlines and being like, oh, we're going to go patch that. And that is reality. And some of the people we're having on tomorrow's show, like, they're like, they do vulnerability scans, right? Like they used to bring like a Raspberry Pi into the environment, the network, and like scan everything once a year. Like, that's definitely not going to cut it, right? And then they give you a 5,000 page report saying like, look at all the stuff we found, like, and that's that. Like, we did vulnerability scan, we did a pen test, right? So.
I can't remember if it was Teddy or Dylan who said something that was really intriguing to me. And you said that vulnerabilities aren't just CVSS rated. And so I want to hear more about that. I want to dig into that a little bit more. So talk about that a little bit.
Yeah. So we view this is oftentimes, I would say, misunderstood, but also just kind of a confusion among everyone. But we view vulnerability management as more than CVEs, right? It's not just patches, it's misconfigurations. So like when you think about like vulnerability management as a whole, it isn't just pertained to, like, a vulnerability isn't necessarily just a CVE, right? There's other things that could make someone or a client vulnerable to something, right? So we view vulnerability management as a combination of asset management, patch management, configuration management, identity management, right? And then on top of that, right, people always ask, like, where does penetration testing go into all this? And it's like, well, that's kind of like your one time a year you test that thing against that once a year. You don't even need necessarily do that. And I own a pen testing company. So it depends on your size, it depends on your risk profile, but ideally, right, vulnerability management is a part of a larger program. And in my mind, it includes asset management, configuration management, patch management, and identity management, right? So there are vulnerabilities that live in the identity layer that people don't think about. They're very easily missed. And I'll tell you firsthand from our pen testing experiences that there are I would say 90% of pen tests that we perform, we don't even need to exploit a CVE, right? Yeah. There's no exploitation like that needed. You can take advantage of misconfiguration of someone placing, credentials somewhere in the environment, or a common one that we see a lot is credentials in LDAP information. So if anyone's out there listening, like, that's like first thing you do, go to LDAP if you can harvest anything in the notes. Right? So there's all sorts of things like that are misconfigured and stuff like that do not require exploitation of a CVE. So we view vulnerability management as the whole thing, not just the initial access vector that you see on the MITRE ATT&CK framework. It's like all the way through their vulnerabilities in every step.
Yeah, that's super interesting. And I think, like, for MSPs listening, struggling, like, how do we charge for this? How do we show value? well, that's maybe what you talk about it that way. Because I think go back, record that, learn how to say that right, and build that in with CSPM, Cloud Security Posture Management. Build it in with identity governance of some sort, layer there. Active Directory monitoring, and then of course your traditional vulnerability scanning like we would think about it. But you build that all into a compelling package, and all of a sudden that starts to become, the value there is very attractive, and you can speak to it very easily. And also you're value positioning yourself against other competitors who are just coming in with a scanner. And so your client's looking at them saying, well, why aren't you guys talking about this, right? So I think those are some really great advice there for MSPs.
Yeah, Teddy, it sounds like you're knocking off a lot of the CIS controls there. I mean, 1 through 7, you're doing some damage there, so that's awesome. Yeah.
Well, it's one of those things too where you look at it and it's like there's a reason, like into the compliance versus security thing. Like, right, there's a reason that those are all controls in and of themselves, is because they're very much do pertain to security, right? And what is driving those things, whether compliance, whether security, right? You got to kind of make a risk decision on those things, but they're all very important aspects to the attack life cycle, and how an attacker is trying to gain access to your environment. So, but yeah, I guess in to be honest with you, like when we were building everything out, the idea was not like, we're not like traditional NIST framework, CIS framework, like assessors. Our background is 100% in attacking, right? Is in hacking. That's been Michael and myself, my co-founder, that's been our last decade. So it's like we built it, and then you bring up stuff like that, and it's like, well, that's actually a good way to kind of tell the story for people that understand the compliance side of things, as opposed to the actual like security side of things for them.
Yeah, and the ones that compliance is closer to reality, and we could probably make the argument, Tim, right? CIS is a little closer to reality, and some are a little antiquated. I mean, if a framework was put out 15 years ago, yeah, it's probably going to be.
Yeah. Just saying. With that being said, like, NIST is still relevant today. Yes, it was put out 18 years ago, but it's been iterated. Trust me, I know. I live and breathe it every day.
Yeah. Don't you say nothing bad about NIST.
Did you say something bad about NIST? What are you talking about, Willis? So, I think it, like you said, it's all part of that overall revenue, reputation, and risk, right? The 3 R's. And what was the 4th R, Jesse? I keep forgetting.
Regrets. Don't have any
regrets.
Wait, did you guys want to see my tattoo? Is that what it was?
Please. Wait. So as we continue down this path of vulnerability management, Jesse already pointed out one of the gorillas in the room. I'm going to point out another one, and that is, when I walked into a new client and I deployed our tools, and then those tools were doing our scans, we're doing our stuff, we're benchmarking it against CIS or NIST or whatever it is, and I'm getting bombarded with all this data because it is a new client that may or may not have had an MSP, did nothing. And the first thing I do when I run my vulnerability stuff, and I let that run for about a week or so we make sure we get everything, and I get into the platform, and it is the Red Sea of death. And I was like, yeah, I don't even know where to start, right? Then I go back to Bruce Almighty, reply all. Yay! No, I don't want to do that. Exactly, right? So one of the things that I see in a lot of the platforms is, like, where do I start, right? Nobody's really addressing where do I start? So even if I picked EPSS, right? If I pick the EP versus the CS, the other stupid acronym, yeah, that one too. Didn't matter which one I picked. There's still a bucket of crap. I'm like, bah! And so, low-hanging fruit. Do I pick off the 1s and 2s at the bottom? Do I just do all the criticals, right? What I'm really getting at here is, how do you define a vulnerability management plan, policy, procedure?
Yeah. I'll take a stab at it. Go ahead.
No,
Teddy,
no, Jesse,
I wanna hear
no. I want to hear from you. I want to hear from you.
Just a pragmatic way to get started is through simple crown jewels exercise, right? So sitting down with the client, where's your most critical data? What pose existential events to your business? And then identify those systems, right? And then
I don't even know. I just make donuts in my donut factory with my sister-in-law. That's it. She got the recipe. I got the dough. That's it. I don't know what I'm doing.
Attack surface management. And that's where I start is what's externally available. So again, an EPSS above 50% is a lot different internally on a VMware server than it is on an exposed RDP server or Citrix server or something like that.
You're throwing acronyms at. I don't know what that is. I just make donuts. Like I can tell you about jelly in Boston. Like again, I'm playing the advocate here, but you get where you're getting the advocate. Like this is what MSPs go through.
Yeah, absolutely. No, and I'm talking to the MSP here, right? Obviously, to your client, you're going to tell it differently, but that's where I see it, like from a technician or an MSP perspective, where to start sifting through to tell my clients where we need to fix and what's most important. You know, what's externally available, and what has the highest rate or potential for exploitation. So I'll let Teddy hop on with his after that.
Yeah. So. Obviously externally, right? But I'll say firsthand, like it is not super common to get into someone's environment from an externally exploitable vulnerability, right? Usually people are pretty ahead on those things, usually, which is a great thing, right? We've gotten to that point, and that's fantastic.
So what does that mean? Like that means my firewall's broken, or does that mean like I got my laptop here and I'm a break fix MSP. I've been doing printers my whole life and now I'm trying to sell MRR. Tell me what that means. What do I do?
So any IP address that's available to the outside world, right? So anything that you can, any of those sites that you can access from your computer anywhere, right? Those are going to be your externally facing computers' IPs, right? So the stuff that's behind the firewall, the internal network, is things that they have their own network, right? They all communicate to each other, similar to like if you're in a house, like you can, there's room, maybe or apartment building, let's say, right? You've got different apartment numbers on each apartment door, right? But then the outside of that apartment has an address. So when the mail comes to that outside address and it drops that stuff off, and then maybe there's mailboxes inside. That's typical networking, right? That's NAT routing. But the stuff, like people in the outside world, those attackers cannot necessarily attack your own personal computer directly. Unless there's
so when I'm talking to Mom's Bakery and I'm like, listen, I did the scan, I came up a bunch of stuff. Like even before I get to that conversation with Mom's Bakery, I'm gonna look and I'm gonna be like, I'm a smart technician. I know that machine is probably not behind a firewall. It doesn't even have the Windows firewall. Probably has a public IP address and it's vulnerable. I should probably take care of that first. Then if I look at like, oh, maybe I have a crappy Linksys router and I have a couple devices behind. Well, first I should be replacing the router, but I should look at like, there's at least one stopgap, right? There is a hallway between me and the outside of the building.
Yeah.
Right. So I should be at least going after the front door before I start dealing with the bedroom door or the bathroom door. I should at least start on the outside door first.
Teddy, there's a little bit of an if though, Tim, right? So usually like most ransomware is a vulnerability in the system. It's an email with a link. You can tell me how tricky it is. Like, is it a UPS? And I know I'm getting a UPS and I clicked it anyway. And so it would execute that vulnerability in the internal system. So so I mean, that's kind of like how it's usually shaken down on these ransomware things.
Yeah.
Go ahead. Fantastic point. I really want to jump in here. That's the reason, right? When people ask about why do I need to scan internally? Why do I need to get an internal pen test done? Why do I need to? Well, the reason is like someone's going to get past, right? There's different ways to get in past that external barrier. There's exploits, right? There's social engineering. You could send an email, you can make a phone call, you can gain access to breach credentials, you can walk in the front door and plug in a computer, and then you have access. So all those ways are in. Then once they're in, what can they gain access to, right? And so typical centralized networks, specifically traditional on-premise Active Directory networks, are comically misconfigured. And usually requires one or two jumps or pivots to get to total access to every computer. But a common misconception is that once they're in, you're totally screwed. And that's not true, right? There are, when you talk about defense in depth, there are things you can put in place. I'm not talking about tools either, ways you can configure an environment that are going to keep someone or a ransomware or an attacker or whoever it may be from pivoting from computer to computer. Mm-hmm. So like overly permissive, Active Directory users, or like domain admins that have access that are accessing multiple computers that are not domain controllers, like things like that allow for quick widespread of those types of events. But there's ways you can configure your Active Directory, and that's the identity piece of what we do. Is helping organizations figure lateral, right?
Exactly. Hey, Printer Tim, it's the lateral movement that, before like COVID, like everyone's like, oh, network defense, right?
Yep. But it's after that though, like you say, like, if someone clicks on an email and your environment's configured properly, you've also got that layer of MDR, EDR in there as well. It's things that you can live with. The problem is if someone gains access to a user's credentials and then they're pivoting, it's very likely that they're pivoting on what looks like normal traffic. So that's where they're like, oh, we have MDR, that stops everything. It's a combination of all those things that prevents those types of attacks.
Yeah.
And
all right, so Dylan, you're the salesperson. Dumb it down for me. Because we can get real technical and real geeky and real like doors and windows, and like you're the sales guy. Dumb it down for me.
And I love the question because I'm not technical. So with the identity piece, it's all about reducing that like blast effect, if you will. So you've got Joe Schmo in marketing that has access to nothing. Well, if they click on a malicious link, the attacker's going to have to jump through a couple hoops. If you're misconfigured to actually gain access to domain admin or access those crown jewels and then totally compromise the environment. That's kind of that non-technical way of explaining it.
Actually, to add to that too, the way that you talk about crown jewels is, what is a crown jewel, right? Is it a system? Right. Is it a user? So the way that we view vulnerabilities is, from a tiered asset perspective, right? Microsoft calls them tier 0, is like domain admins, domain controllers, anyone that has access to those domain controllers. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and then you can label those accordingly, right? So when you're doing like an asset management, like tagging system, which systems really matter and which ones don't.
Right.
High value asset.
High value asset. That is a user, that is a computer, that is a group, that can be anything, but they're interchangeable, especially in a centralized network like that.
I was just talking to a vendor, just like literally back and forth all week, and was like, do you have a way for me to tag HVAs by things in your environment? Because I need to know where my HVAs are. And if I'm using your tool to do a thing, then I want to know these are my HVAs. Now, that can get a little challenging, because if someone does get in your network and they run a query that says, show me everything tagged HVA, that's a problem. So we internally have our own set of acronyms, our own Pig Latin for that matter, that defines what an HVA is, but in the systems, it's labeled something like banana. Whatever.
All the security through obscurity.
Well, because Teddy and Dylan, I don't know if your platform has a field that's called high value asset, yes or no. That might be bad. But if you had a free text field that I could put in banana, someone gets in and they're like, oh, what are all these things labeled banana? Maybe. So by obscurity.
Yeah, just to put my answer to what is a crown jewel, I always look at it from a data perspective, right? Like where is my data, critical data stored? So whether that data is in somebody's mind, right? It's a person or a skill that people can do. It's data in a way. Whether it's intellectual property or application code, all those things are data. So for me, the way I categorize is I look at it from a data perspective, and I think that's helped me kind of create buckets of those different things and start to map them just as a pragmatic piece of advice.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. So we got about 5-10 minutes left here. We always try to end this show on like a key takeaway, right? On like, what do we feel is one nugget? I know Tim always usually has a 20-minute rambling on his one nugget, but
not always. Not always.
So actually, I'm going to kind of go around this way. I'm going to put me over here.
I'm early though, because just in case.
Yeah, well, that's why I'm starting early, right? Well, that and because we all have stuff coming up right after this that is equally important. So I'll start with my one key takeaway, which is always the same. It falls into one or two buckets. And this bucket of the one key takeaway is have a person, have a process, write it down, and follow it. People, process, tools, and technologies later.
Yeah.
Have a vulnerability management plan, process, procedure, and have that not only across all your technicians, but also at your clients too. And since Tim, you're in the top square, you're next.
I'm gonna add on to that. So eat your own dog food, right? Like, make sure you're doing this on yourself, and you'll have a very clear understanding of. And we didn't really talk about that, right? Because when talking about like how to deliver this, you should know based on running vulnerability management on the MSP internally. As Tim said, what's the process, what's the people, what's the resources or hours or whatever we need, and you'll get a very good understanding like how you need to price this, how you need to budget this, how you need to sell and deliver this. So
all right, Teddy, one key takeaway.
Pulling together both of what you guys said there, is making sure that you are not just buying a tool to do these things, but that you're informing, you have an informed process to do that, and ensuring that when you're selling that to your client, know that patch management and vulnerability management are different, and if you're already selling patch management, there's no reason you can't add vulnerability management. There's different layers to security there. So
that's awesome. And Dylan?
So you guys took a lot of really great ideas that I was going to mention. One piece here is build this into your onboarding journey. You don't want to inherit a customer that has a dumpster fire of an environment and you have no idea. So, get an understanding of their environment before it becomes your responsibility, and prove some value before you sign them on as a managed service customer.
Yeah.
Awesome. And lastly?
Yeah, that's the danger of going last. You're always like, please don't say my takeaway. No, for me, the takeaway is focus on your scoping. It kind of blends in with what everyone said, but I really like what Teddy said about making vulnerability management more than just scanning and remediating, CVSs. Build in identity management, build in your cloud security posture management, and make sure you scope this appropriately. That's the one way to be profitable, is to make sure roles and responsibility matrices are defined as to who owns what and who's fixing what, and overlay that with a good retainer that you can dip into should you need to help out with project work. I think that's the takeaway.
That's awesome. And we've got just a couple minutes left here. I don't even know what's on the schedule. I think this is going to air Friday of Thanksgiving week. Is that correct, Tim? So I don't know. I think this will air. So, we forgot to mention this in the beginning. Comments are broken because even though the does say live stream, we're not actually live streaming. But please make sure you like, comment, and share nonetheless.
Secrets out.
Secrets out. Yeah, sorry about that. So
we have a gamification kind of focused on December 1st, I believe, is the next one after that, right? So AJ Lease has a company called Syntax Security, but it should be interesting, right? Like, how do we
like that.
talk about gamification?
Yeah,
I like
awesome.
the gamification. I just can't spell the word because every time so we're building gamification into our platform for some of the pieces that we're doing. And every time I have Siri, because I like to dictate to my phone because I'm lazy and fat fingers. And I was like, hey, on the gamification stuff. And it's like, game fornicate. What? No! It totally botched that. And my developer was like, what are you talking about? So, anyhow, always good to have great guests. Dylan, Teddy, Shield. Is it shieldcyber.com? What is it? What is it?
Shieldcyber.io.
So let's have a little. We have 2 minutes left. So .io versus .com versus .studio versus .beer. Did you know they have a .beer?
I like it. I'm gonna go buy that domain right now.
Well, I already own a few, so yeah, like .onlyfans. No, so. I picked .io because the domain name that I wanted was not available. Now the new one is, but we've had this discussion with a bunch of different people on the TL on the top level. I can't even say that acronym at the moment. Quick last thoughts.
No. .com versus .io. It's a very popular debate. .io is that sleek, sexy SaaS. When the reality is, I was sitting in the front seat of my car, and the .io was available, and so we grabbed it.
That was me on Christmas Eve over Die Hard while my friend is drinking beers, making my logo.
Hey,
I personally like
Christmas movie.
I personally like the .io. So I'm in the minority there.
I feel like it's more tech. It's more tech feeling than a .com.
Yeah.
We have teamtim.live, right? So as you can see right up here in the little bar, teamtim.live, because not today, but we're always live. So there it is. So and then Jesse, can I do the whole
or we can do one of those sitcom high fives and
Eddie over here. All right, enough of this already. So hey everybody, as always, thank you for being here. Do the likes, the shares, the comments, the follows, the repost, whatever. I'm Tim Golden, founder of Compliance Scorecard, with our co-host Jesse from Power PSA Consulting, and Tim, that's very inquisitive IT, who's the founder over there. We appreciate you all being here, and we shall see you soon.
Subscribe now.
Damn.